I know I did state on my latest community post I'm going to be posting my review of episode 5 of Stargirl along with my review of episode 6, but the amount of Easter eggs, they just made this episode the comic book reader's nerdgasm. So yeah, welcome back guys to another one of my videos and my review of episode 5 of Stargirl. Mostly Easter eggs, not really review, because this episode, while an 8.5, was nothing more than an origin story and mostly focused on Rick Tyler. Now this isn't really the first time we met a Rex Tyler within the extended DC TV universe, and I'm saying extended because I'm including the Arrowverse, because the Arrowverse did make it clear that all of this is part of one big multiverse. You know, as they came to ending the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, they made that much clear. It is all connected, and the events of Stargirl are happening on the newly formed Earth 2 post-Crisis. But as I just mentioned, not the first time we've ever seen a Rex Tyler on TV. We've met Rex Tyler on the second season of Legends of Tomorrow along with an Earth 1 version of the Justice Society of America. Actually, and to be more precise, the first time we've ever seen him was on the finale of the first season of Legends of Tomorrow. But jumping into this episode though, that gave us a lot of Easter eggs and a lot of new characters, we've got Rex Tyler's notes to start with at the very beginning of the episode. Now all the equations, the chemical compositions, and whatnot, all of that stuff, that's an Easter egg to the 1 hour pill, Miraclo. On the pages of the comics, and as opposed to what we see on this episode, or what we get to know on this episode, Miraclo is actually the source of Hourman's powers, both Rex Tyler and Rick Tyler. Now Wendy Tyler, the wife here, the name is true to the comics, Rex's wife and Rick's mother. The little kid we see at the beginning is of course the second comic book Hourman, aka Rick Tyler. But I also found the use of the name Matt for Wendy's brother pretty interesting on this episode. I mean, I felt it's an Easter egg to Matthew Tyler, the android clone of Rex Tyler, and also the third future Hourman. I just keep getting the feeling that they're always trying to give us more Easter eggs towards other versions of the characters on the pages of the comics. Like instead of the two icicles that we get to meet on the series, you know, father and son, we also got Easter eggs to the grandson, the third icicle on the pages of the comics. In the same fashion, they're doing this with Hourman. But still, on Hourman on the pages of the comics, he was also killed on the line of duty, not at the hands of Solomon Grundy though, and definitely not while Rick was at that young age. The premiere did make it seem like all the JSA members died on that night, that very scene of the premiere, but this episode does give us a different story. Rex Tyler and his wife died in that accident, and that accident was caused by Solomon Grundy. Now, Rick Tyler on the pages of the comics, he did have a few issues of his own, and it all related to his father as well. Not in this fashion exactly, because his father did not die when he was that young, but more because his father was distant. I mean, he rarely saw the man. Rex was always either away on business or on superhero duty when Rick was a child, so yeah, there was no solid relationship early on, and while Rick was a kid who tried to please his father, tried to, you know, prove himself to his father, he always had issues with the lack of closeness between him and his dad. There is also the talk about Rick being a delinquent halfway through the episode. Not sure who said it, was it Beth, was it Yolanda, but nonetheless, that as well happens to be an Easter egg to his comic book counterpart, because while Rick, a scientist, wanted his son to have extraordinary education, Rick wasn't all that interested. But are we done with Rex Tyler and Rick Tyler? No, 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 I told you in the title, it's like a KitKat Chunky, except with Easter eggs. Apparently this series is doing away with Miraclo. They're not introducing it, they're not making it a thing, making the hourglass into the source of Hourman's powers. The brilliant chemist bit though, about Rex Tyler, that was all about Hourman's powers coming from Miraclo. Miraclo was the invention of the chemist that Rex Tyler was. Now on the pages of the source material, Rick would become the second Hourman as the threat of Crisis became evident, you know, Crisis on Infinite Earths, so right before Crisis. Over here it is right after Crisis, as indicated by the final episode of the Crisis crossover, the Arrowverse Crisis crossover that is, which makes for a slight delay in timing, but nonetheless pretty close. Last though but not least when it comes to the Tylers, to the Hourmans of this series, the last name that Rick goes by is Harris. That is his mother's maiden name, Wendy Harris, and that was before she married Rex Tyler and changed her last name to Tyler, which makes his uncle, the man who claims he is his father all over the place, the man who we met multiple times over the course of this episode, into Matthew Harris. But alright, we've got another character introduced on this episode. We didn't see much of her, but that doesn't make her less important as a comic book character, because Artemis Crock, one of the future villains that these guys are probably going to have to face off with, one that would go by her first name, Artemis, for a villain, and then she would change that to her mother's alias, becoming the second Tigress on the pages of the comics. She is the daughter of Lawrence Crock, aka Larry Crusher, the man we've met repeatedly since the beginning of the season, and of course Paula Brooks, aka the Tigress, whom we've met on the premiere of the season during that Golden Age JSA scene at the beginning of the season. But when it comes to abilities and powers, Artemis has got no superpowers, but she's got certain abilities, and those can be summarized in the words, really good with bows and arrows, and trick arrows. So Artemis Crock is exactly where they got the inspiration for Evelyn Sharp on Arrow from. You know, the one that ended up going by the name of Artemis, the one that started on Team Arrow, only for the viewers to end up realizing that she was working with Prometheus, and that she is as well a villain. But there are like 4 or 5 more characters that we still need to talk about here. Yes, 4 or 5 more. It's gonna be briefer with some, but let's talk about them one by one. So, to get started with what remains of this review/Easter egg video, careful, there are dragons in the water. That janitor, still not sure who he is really, got a speculation here, gonna talk about it in a moment, but that janitor though is definitely talking about Shiv being part of this whole thing, being in school, you know, Cindy Berman, definitely talking about her father, the Dragon King, being around and in town. Now I think his name has been mentioned earlier in the events of the season, however though I don't remember if it was, but looking at IMDb he is credited as Janitor Justin, and I started thinking, who's the only Justin that's connected to all these characters, or at least the one that is majorly connected to these characters, and the only one I could think of over here is one of King Arthur's knights, Sir Justin, aka Justin Arthur, aka the man known in the comics as the Shining Knight. I mean, the age and the accent and the fact that he looks nothing like McHale, who plays the role of Starman, or played the role of Starman, makes it more plausible that he is someone completely different, and the name of course does help us get to that point. The assumption that he is the Shining Knight, that he's gonna become part of this group. But moving on though to one of these other characters that I talked about earlier, you know, the many characters we need to talk about, let's talk Beth Chapel for a moment. Now I really felt bad for Beth Chapel, by the way they were treating her. However though, it is entertaining how she recruited herself rather than being recruited by Courtney. In the comics, just like Charles McNider, she did end up blinded, so I'm not sure if they're gonna go there or not, but it is possible that's something that they're planning for the future. In the comics as well, and just like Charles McNider, she would realize at some point that she could see in the dark, that she would need these goggles, again, just like Charles McNider, to see while in a more lit up setting. Now the other thing about this is that in the comics she was a protege of Charles McNider. I think the whole goggles speaking to her in the voice of Charles McNider, that part is an Easter egg to that protege relationship, you know, that mentor-mentee relationship. Now, of course, her talk about the goggles, the need of the goggles, the use of the goggles to help Charles McNider see, that's pretty true, that's pretty spot on, that's right out of the comics. We get to see Cindy Berman once again. I mean, the series is kind of setting her up to be a villain. 2 episodes from now, we're gonna see a 2-parter that has Shiv rise as a villain, or probably rise as a villain. Let's not forget as well that her costume on this episode is quite resembling of her comic book costume. It's not an exact match, but it's quite resembling for something that she made for a Halloween party. We've also got Jenni Williams. She's friends with Shiv, friends with, you know, Cindy Berman. She's coming into focus. Cindy Berman is the leader of the pack and she treats no one well, and that means that Jenni Williams is gonna have it with her at some point, which means that at some point we might have her as the next Jenni Thunder. I know a lot of people commented on my most recent video about Stargirl, going on and on all about the Yakeem name drop, you know, Mike's friend Yakeem, and they were like, yeah, he's gonna become the next Johnny Thunder. I think it is a possibility. I just don't think it is the biggest possibility. I mean, Mike is too young. Yakeem is gonna be too young. This series, so far, where possible, seems to be going with an all-girls team-up, except for Rick Tyler, and that's the case because there is no female Hourman on the pages of the comics. So yeah, I think Jenni Williams is going to end up becoming Jenni Thunder, the second Thunderbolt on the series. But here though are a few notable mentions. They're all part of the same scene, and that's before we get to the final one on this video. We've got Red B, Rick Raleigh. That also hints at the possibility that we might at some point down the road get Jenna Raleigh, his niece. Now, Richard Raleigh was affiliated with both the All-Star Squadron and the Freedom Fighters, so what we've got over here is basically an Easter egg to these two entities, these two team-ups, but the more important part is most of these young characters that we're seeing on these episodes, you know, the good ones that is, they're actually associated at one point or the other on the pages of the comics with the All-Star Squadron. And yes, by the way, he's got a lot of abilities when it comes to hand-to-hand combat and all of that stuff, but his power there was all about training bees. We've never been privy to how he did that, but we know he did it on the pages of the comics. Now, I've got no idea how this date of death ties in with the comics in any way, shape, or form, but if you do know, let me know in the comments. Not surprising though that we do get Red B, a reference to Red B on this episode, because on the pages of the comics, Red B died fighting Baron Blitzkrieg, and that was while he was trying to save the freedom fighters that Baron captured. The funny thing about all of this is that Baron was after Miraclo. This capturing of the freedom fighters, this leverage that he had because he wanted to get Miraclo from Hourman. Not surprisingly as well, that in the afterlife, in Limbo, he would end up meeting up with Mid-NIte, the second Starman on the pages of the comics, and son to the first Starman, Jack Knight, whom he also meets in Limbo. But there's finally one major Easter egg on this episode, and it all has to do with Henry King Jr. that is. Henry King Jr. is seemingly getting his powers. They're slowly creeping in, a straight out Easter egg out of the comics towards his comic book destiny. You know, he's the good Brainwave on the pages of the comics, the one that errs on the side of good, as opposed to his evil father, you know, the Injustice Society father of his. But yeah though, it's not just creeping in, it starts as a little bit of a headachy situation with him. Moments later though, he is actually able to hear Yolanda's thoughts. We do see that on this episode. With that though having been said, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. If I missed any Easter eggs on this episode, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it one of those much appreciated likes, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I upload a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, thank you so much for tuning in to this one, stay safe, and have a great day.